US President Donald Trump confirmed that he does not rule out supplying Ukraine with Tomahawk cruise missiles. At the same time, he noted that he intends to discuss this issue first
with Russia, a nation that has been a significant focus of international relations and geopolitical discussions. Trump, the former president of the United States, whose administration often engaged in complex diplomatic exchanges,
suggested that he could have a phone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I can say, listen, if this war is not resolved, I will send them Tomahawks.
At the same time, the US president assumes that his decision to transfer missiles to Ukraine would lead to even greater escalation of the situation.
Tomahawk missiles are a new step in aggression. If this war is not resolved, I will send them Tomahawk missiles. This is an incredible, very powerful weapon.
The US president also once again emphasized that Putin must end his aggression against Ukraine.
If Putin doesn't solve the problem, it won't be good for him.
Russia has repeatedly stated that it is concerned about the prospect of these long-range missiles being supplied to Ukraine. Earlier, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy emphasized in an interview with Fox News that if Ukraine receives Tomahawk missiles from the US, strikes will be carried out exclusively against Russian military targets.
We are talking exclusively about military targets. We have never, even with all the pain from losing our families, children, and soldiers, our people have never struck their civilians. This is a major difference between Ukraine and Russia.
Zelenskyy noted that the Russians sell energy resources, receive money, and then invest it in the military sector. That is why these are military targets for Ukraine.
It is important to reduce Russia's ability to continue this prolonged war. This is the only way to do it.
Zelenskyy also stated that it is necessary to increase pressure on the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. According to him, this can be done diplomatically or by exerting pressure on the battlefield.
Donald Trump hinted that after Gaza, he plans to resolve the war in Ukraine. The American leader stated that it would be good to make a peace deal with Iran, but noted that before that, it is necessary to deal with Russia.
That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? But first, we have to deal with Russia. If you don't mind, Steve, let's focus on Russia. We'll take care of it.
According to political analyst Volodymyr Fesenko, the end of the war in the Middle East will directly affect the war in Ukraine, because the Russian-Ukrainian war is now tied to Trump's reputation, the political analyst believes.
First of all, it's a precedent. In particular for Trump himself, it's a successful implementation of his plan. It affects Trump, it inspires him. If it worked in Israel, in the Gaza Strip, then why not try to do the same with the Russian-Ukrainian war now? Trump will deal with this war because he promised to end it.
During a speech in King City, Donald Trump shared a story about how he first sent Steve Witkoff to Moscow to negotiate with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin to discuss the war in Ukraine.
Witkoff had no idea about Russia or Putin. He knew very little about politics. His meeting with Putin lasted 5 hours. I asked, "What the heck did you talk about for 5 whole hours?" He replied that they talked about interesting things and about the very reason they met in the first place.
According to the American leader, he thought that resolving the war in Ukraine would be easy, much easier than what he did with Israel. The Kremlin also made a statement regarding the possibility of arranging a conversation between US President Donald Trump and the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. According to Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, a phone conversation between the leaders of the two countries will take place as soon as an agreement is reached on this. So far, according to him, there is no clear agreement on such a conversation.
US President Donald Trump announced the end of the war between Israel and Hamas. He stated that Hamas is adhering to the disarmament plan. Also in the Israeli government, Trump signed the guest book, writing, "It is my great honor, a great and wonderful day, a new beginning. The Hamas movement will fulfill all the agreements stipulated by the peace plan," the US president stated. All 20 Israeli hostages have been released. Hamas handed over another group of 13 people to the Red Cross, and they are being reunited with their loved ones. According to media reports, Hamas still has the bodies of 28 deceased hostages. They will likely also be handed over to Israel soon. Earlier, it was reported that, according to preliminary estimates, about 500,000 Palestinians have returned to their destroyed homes in the Gaza Strip after the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas came into effect.
On the beach in Tel Aviv, ahead of Trump's visit, a huge banner appeared with the word "Thank you."
Earlier, the US president stated that reaching a peace agreement on Gaza could become the biggest achievement he has ever been involved in. Trump also said that achieving an agreement on Gaza would have been impossible if he had not ordered strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities in June. He believes that these actions weaken Tehran's support for Hamas and force the group to become more compliant. The president is convinced that eliminating the threat of Iran's nuclear program paved the way for uniting Arab and Muslim states around a peaceful settlement in Gaza.
A clear signal. NATO is launching exercises starting October 13th to strengthen the alliance's readiness for nuclear deterrence. The Netherlands is serving as the main host country. This was reported by the alliance's press service. Approximately 70 aircraft from 14 allied countries and 2,000 personnel will take part in the exercises. The main base will be the Volkel Air Base in the Netherlands. Among the combat aircraft involved will be Dutch F-35 fighters, as well as reconnaissance, refueling, airborne and command and control aircraft from the Allies. As NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte noted, these measures also send a clear signal to any potential adversary that NATO is ready to defend its allies.
This is an annual and routine training exercise, and we need to do this because it helps ensure that our nuclear deterrence capability remains as reliable, safe, secure, and effective as possible.
Meanwhile, off the coast of France, a Russian submarine armed with Kalibr missiles surfaced. Reports indicate a serious malfunction. The vessel in question is the diesel-electric submarine B-261 Novorossiysk, which reportedly has significant technical problems on board. The channel VCHK-UGPU reported the malfunctions on September 27th. According to their information, due to damage in the fuel system of the Novorossiysk, which is on combat duty in the Mediterranean Sea, fuel is leaking directly into the bilge. Submariner and Dr. Leonid Zelenskyy explained that such a situation threatens either a fire or poisoning of the crew by fuel vapors.
With such a combination, it is very dangerous for the submarine to dive, because when there is a high concentration of diesel fuel, the boat must be constantly ventilated. In order to do this, it has to remain on the surface at all times.
The expert also believes that the Russian Navy tried to keep the incident quiet and did not ask for help in time. A French Navy frigate has been sent to monitor the submarine. This was reported by the NATO Naval Command. They stated that the alliance is ready to defend itself, constantly monitoring the situation at sea.
Russia has lost more than 280,000 military personnel in just the first 8 months of 2025, according to a document that, according to Ukrainian intelligence, contains leaked Russian official data. As Politico writes, these catastrophic losses are the price Russia pays for tiny gains at the front. The document states that about 87,000 soldiers have been killed and 34 are missing in action. Around 160,000 have been wounded and more than 2,000 have been taken prisoner. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, since the start of the full-scale aggression in 2022, Russia has lost more than 1 million people killed, wounded, or missing in action. On average, the Russian Federation loses about 1,000 soldiers every day. Russia's attempts to boost military recruitment through high financial incentives are losing their effectiveness. This indicates that the main method of attracting volunteers to participate in the war is starting to exhaust itself. The number of people signing contracts with the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation is no longer growing, even in those regions where the largest payments are offered. Everyone who wanted to make money from the war has already signed up. This was reported by the Institute for the Study of War. The constant increase in payments and the expansion of the social benefits package for military personnel indicate a slowdown in recruitment and the Kremlin's attempts to find new incentives for enlistment. Experts from the Institute for the Study of War believe that if the recruitment rate continues to decline and Russia is unable to make up for its heavy losses, this may force Vladimir Putin either to resort to the forced mobilization of reservists, which he is extremely reluctant to do, or to sit down at the negotiating table to end the war. Meanwhile, Ukrainian defenders managed to push back Russian occupiers near 4 settlements in the Donetsk region, according to the monitoring project Deep State. In the Pokrovsk direction, Ukrainian defenders succeeded in destroying 2 artillery systems, 2 vehicles, 12 UAVs, and a relay antenna. as well as electronic warfare equipment. The Ukrainian armed forces also struck 4 UAV control points and 6 shelters for enemy personnel.
The head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, is being criticized by Z bloggers, and the Central Bank of Russia refuses to print Grozny on the banknote. And all this is because of a spat with Deputy and General Vladimir Shamanov. On September 25th, the deputy delivered a harsh critique of the bill initiated by the Chechen parliament to rename settlements in Chechnya, according to Novaya Gazeta Europe. Shamanov was particularly opposed to the intention of the Republican authorities to rename 3 stanitsas, Naor, Cernovodsk, and Shelkovskaya, which were once considered Russian strongholds in Chechnya. 7 days later, the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, responded to General Vladimir Shamanov. Speaking before Chechen teachers, Kadyrov called Shamanov a vile scoundrel. He stated that the Chechen authorities are not renaming all Chechen cities, although they could if they wanted to. The head of Chechnya cited Grozny as an example, saying that there were plans to rename it after his father, but he did not allow it. Z bloggers came to the defense of the Russian deputy.
What right does Kadyrov even have to speculate on the topic of the special military operation?
At the same time, Kadyrov got himself involved in yet another scandal. The head of Chechnya wanted to see Grozny on the 500-ruble banknote, but the central bank cancelled the vote for symbols on the bills dedicated to the North Caucasian Federal District. This vote sparked a lot of debate on the internet. The main rivalry unfolded between Mount Elbrus and Grozny city, which received the most votes. Ramzan Kadyrov offered 10 iPhone 17s for voting for the Grozny city complex on all 4 platforms at once. Some pro-military bloggers claimed that votes for Grozny city were being artificially inflated and began campaigning for Elbrus instead. As a result, the bank decided to cancel the vote. This decision outraged Chechnya's Minister for National Policy, Akhmet Dudayev.
We can see that many people are dissatisfied with the level of participation of residents of the Chechen Republic, with the pace of their involvement, and with the dynamics of our lead. The increase in the number of votes in the Grozny network.
As a result, the Bank of Russia promised to hold a new vote, but the dates will be announced later.
The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has stripped the mayor of Odessa, Hennady Trukhanov, of Ukrainian citizenship. This was reported by the media, citing sources. The head of state stated on his Telegram channel that the presence of Russian citizenship has been confirmed for certain individuals, and corresponding decisions have been prepared regarding them. He added that the decree has been signed. Zelenskyy did not specify whom he was referring to, but during the national telethon, citing a source in the government, it was reported that the decree on the revocation of Ukrainian citizenship was issued against the mayor of Odessa, Hennady Trukhanov, and the former MP from OPZZH, Oleg Tsaryov, who has been convicted in Ukraine, and ballet dancer Sergei Polunin. The reason for revoking Trukhanov's citizenship was a petition published on the President's office website, which gathered the required 25,000 signatures for consideration by the head of state in less than a day. The author of the petition claims that open sources have repeatedly reported that Trukhanov holds a Russian passport and tax identification number, which is against the constitution of Ukraine. Trukhanov himself denies having a Russian Federation passport and called the decision to strip him of Ukrainian citizenship a falsification. In a comment to Suspilne, he stated that he would file a lawsuit in court. If his citizenship is revoked, Trukhanov will automatically cease to be the mayor of Odessa. It is still unknown who will take his position. According to Union, there are 2 possible scenarios for how events might unfold. According to the first scenario, the position of acting mayor could be taken by the secretary of the Odessa City Council, Ihor Koval. In the second scenario, a city military administration would be established, headed by Oleksiy Kimchenko, the deputy of the Odessa Regional Administration under Ole Kiper. The publication Dumska, citing sources, reports that a city military administration will be established in Odessa. Its head, preliminarily, will be the current head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration, Serhiy Vaisak.
Donald Trump recently stated that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan could potentially help to resolve Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine.
He is respected both in Ukraine and in Russia. He is my friend. You understand why I get along with the strong, not the weak.
President Erdogan took part in the signing ceremony of the Gaza Agreement. Before the ceremony, he was greeted by US President Donald Trump at the International Exhibition Center. Erdogan spoke with Trump and then took a photo with him. Let us recall that the Turkish leader has stated that Crimea should return to Ukraine in accordance with international law. It has also become known that on October 17th, Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy will hold a meeting at the White House. The meeting was confirmed by the American leader himself while speaking with a journalist.
Will you be receiving Zelenskyy on Friday?
I think so.
Axios, citing sources, reports that the leaders will discuss what weapons should be provided to Kyiv, including the possibility of supplying Tomahawk missiles, which would radically change the situation. An Axios source explained that there are certain issues that cannot be discussed over the phone. The publication also notes that long-range missiles would allow Ukraine to target remote areas of mainland Russia, including Moscow. Preliminarily, Zelenskyy is expected to arrive in the US on Thursday. The meeting with Trump will take place the following day. It should also be noted that on the last weekend, October 11th and 12th, the leaders of the two countries had 2 consecutive phone conversations. It is known that the parties discussed the possible transfer of Tomahawk missiles, Patriot air defense systems, as well as assistance to Ukraine in restoring its energy sector.
The Federal Security Service of Russia has opened a case against businessman Mikhail Khodorkovsky and members of the Anti-War Committee of Russia for violent seizure of power and the creation of a terrorist organization. According to a statement from the FSB Public Relations Center, the grounds for the charges were the declaration of the Anti-War Committee of Russia adopted in 2023, as well as the creation of a platform for Russian democratic forces in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. In the opinion of the security service, Khodorkovsky presents this as an alternative to the authorities of the Russian Federation to Western countries. In addition, the Federal Security Service believes that the founders of the Anti-War Committee are allegedly financing organizations recognized as terrorist by the aggressor country, Ukrainian nationalist units, and are allegedly recruiting militants to seize power in Russia by force. A case under Articles on violent seizure of power and organizing a terrorist community has been opened against Khodorkovsky and another 22 people. In particular, this list includes the writer and human rights activist Viktor Shenderovich, political scientist and publicist Ekaterina Shulman, and other opposition figures. Khodorkovsky is also accused of publicly calling for terrorist activities. Khodorkovsky himself wrote on his Telegram channel that the adoption of the platform of Russian democratic forces in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe is seen by the Kremlin as a major problem. According to him, 3 departments of the presidential administration, the Anti-Corruption Foundation, and the FSB were categorically displeased by this. It should be noted that the Anti-War Committee of Russia considers Putin's regime a dictatorship and has repeatedly drawn attention to the illegitimacy of the new terms of the Russian dictator and the falsification of elections. Members of the organization state that one of their goals is a change of power in Russia, but they deny accusations of terrorism.
If Russia were to attack Poland in 2025 the way it attacked Ukraine, it would be destroyed by NATO air forces and the alliance's ground troops. Former commander of US forces in Europe, Ben Hodges, explained what could happen in the event of a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia.
Kaliningrad would be eliminated within the very first hours. In the first hours, Kaliningrad would be gone, all Russian facilities destroyed. Any Russian military facilities in Sevastopol as well.
Russia is likely preparing for a long-term military confrontation that goes beyond the current war in Ukraine. The Kremlin intends to sharply increase production of the latest T-90M tanks, creating a long-term threat to NATO. This is reported by the Institute for the Study of War. According to documents obtained by analysts, Russia's Uralvagonzavod intends to reach peak tank production starting in 2027. The plans are striking. The peak is in 2028, with the production of 428 T-90M and T-90M2 tanks. The overall plan for 2027 to 2029 is to produce 1,118 new and modernized tanks. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War note that these ambitious plans coincide with the current situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. There has been a noticeable decrease in the use of Russian tanks compared to 2023 to 2024. According to international security expert Taras Shevchenko, the Kremlin is using its experience of aggression against Ukraine to prepare for a possible attack on NATO.
Currently, NATO's eastern flank and the North Atlantic Alliance as a whole are going through all the same phases of preparation for Russian aggression that Ukraine once went through. After this preparatory phase comes the stage of active hybrid operations, which we saw in February 2014 in Crimea.
First comes propaganda and provocations, then a hybrid operation followed by ground actions. The expert believes that the threat of a full-scale war for the North Atlantic Alliance from Russia is more than real. Russian tourists in Egypt have been deprived of free strong alcohol, forbidden from going on excursions, and not allowed to leave their hotels, according to the Telegram channel Shot. This so-called lockdown happened because of the summit on Gaza. The channel's authors believe that 2 days of vacation for Russians were lost in the hotels of Sharm el-Sheikh.
Today is October 11th, and look, we have these big planes flying today. Summit.
Guides warned tourists that it was not advisable to leave the hotels during the days of the summit. At the entrance, soldiers and police officers were on duty. Boat trips were also banned. The entire coastline was patrolled by military boats. Excursions to the old town of Sharm el-Sheikh are prohibited. Many guides refuse to refund money for trips and instead offer tourists to reschedule for dates after the summit or give discounts on longer excursions. Russians have no choice but to soberly admire the views from their hotels, writes Shot. Meanwhile, Russians are not welcome at resorts in France, Italy and Greece, which have become popular among Russian tourists. European countries have decided to tighten entry requirements for Russians traveling to Europe. In particular, Germany wants to push for stricter visa regulations for Russians in the Schengen area. The document prepared by Berlin as part of the development of the new 19th sanctions package contains a demand for the European Commission to fully implement the 2022 recommendations. The Czech Republic has already banned entry to Russian diplomats and holders of service passports who do not have accreditation in the country. This was announced on social network X on Tuesday, September 30th by Czech Foreign Minister Jan Lipavsky. He added that the Prague government supported his initiative. The ban will apply at international airports. In addition, as of September 30th, all Czech visa centers in Russia have been closed. This follows from a statement posted on the website of their operating company. It states that the last day for accepting documents at regional Czech visa centers was September 26th and at the Moscow center September 29th.
Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev has announced changes to 40 articles of the Republic's constitution. He made this statement during the first meeting of the Working Group on Parliamentary Reform. Earlier, the Kazakh leader proposed moving to a unicameral parliament. According to him, such a transition fully aligns with international trends, and a similar parliamentary system has been adopted by 2/3 of the world's countries. However, as the president of Kazakhstan stated, such an important step should only be taken through broad public discussion. Tokayev noted that amendments to the constitution should primarily be made within the framework of parliamentary reform.
The changes will affect about 40 articles of the Basic Law. After that, it will be necessary to bring at least 10 constitutional laws and more than 50 codes and laws into compliance. This process, in essence, is comparable to adopting a new constitution.
According to Tokayev, the main goal of the reform is to carry out a profound transformation of the entire representative branch of power. Thus, the legislative body will be able to fully realize its role as an institution that reflects the interest and will of the country's citizens. In August, the Kazakh president stated that there is no longer a family clan system in power in Kazakhstan. It is worth noting that Kassym-Jomart Tokayev is introducing a series of reforms that deprive the Kremlin of its former influence over Kazakhstan, which was possible during the rule of the previous president, Nursultan Nazarbayev, an ally of the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. In particular, in the current version of the Kazakh constitution, Tokayev has limited presidential powers to a single term, which means that Nazarbayev will not be able to run for president again.
The war must end. At the opening of another Ramstein meeting in Brussels, Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth made a number of tough statements regarding the Russian-Ukrainian war and announced a significant expansion of international support for Ukraine. The U.S. Secretary of Defense warned that if there is no path to peace in the short term, the U.S., together with its allies, will take the necessary steps to impose even greater costs on Russia for its aggression.
Under President Trump's leadership, we intend to put an end to the war in Ukraine. The war must end.
The key news from the meeting was the expansion of the U.S. arms procurement program for Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte reported that more than half of the alliance's member states have joined this initiative. Rutte also urged not to overestimate Russia's capabilities.
We know that their pilots are known for their inability to operate aircraft, and their captains don't know how to drop anchor.
At the same time, the head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, Kiriilo Budanov, made a statement.
Russia would have lost the war long ago, and Ukraine would have regained all its occupied territories if not for Moscow's support, primarily from North Korea.
The Pentagon has already developed plans to sell or transfer Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, writes the New York Times, in case Trump gives the order, to supply missiles to Kiev. And Germany will provide Ukraine with a new military aid package worth 2 billion euros, announced German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius.
On an American A-10 attack aircraft, one of 12 planes from the Idaho National Guard, markings indicating the destruction of Iranian Shahed drones were spotted on the nose. Kyiv Post reports that photos of the aircraft at an international airport in New Hampshire have appeared online. According to the War Zone, the A-10 aircraft returned after a 6-month deployment in the Middle East, where American forces intercepted Iranian drones. The article suggests that the attack aircraft may have participated in such operations. In January of last year, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Oleksandr Syrsky, stated in an interview that for successful counterattacks, the defense forces need American A-10 attack aircraft. The aircraft can be used to destroy drones, as its endurance and maneuverability make it ideal for combating strike UAVs, particularly the Iranian Shahed and Russian Geran-2. In addition, as aviation expert Valery Romanenko notes in the program Arsenal, the aircraft can also be useful for destroying other targets.
The A-10 is equipped with enormous power and a 30mm 7-barreled cannon that fires 6,000 rounds per second, allowing it to destroy tanks on the battlefield or on the move with sheer artillery fire.
The publication Kyiv Post notes that the U.S. Air Force has been wanting to retire the A-10 from service for several years now. The latest Senate National Defense Authorization Act proposes keeping about 100 of these aircraft in service with the U.S. Air Force and gradually phasing them out over a longer period. The publication concludes that A-10 attack aircraft equipped with air-to-air missiles have the potential to become an effective measure in the fight against Russian drones attacking Ukraine. If the United States supplies Ukraine with Tomahawk cruise missiles, Russia will likely escalate its nuclear intimidation and may intensify its massive strikes in response. According to unions citing Liga.net, this was stated by a high-ranking NATO official in Brussels. According to the publication, the alliance representative noted that NATO does not see any new weapons developments that Russia could deploy. Therefore, the aggressor country's response will likely include nuclear threats, a temporary escalation of the conflict, or punitive strikes. At the same time, the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin is indeed afraid of Tomahawk missiles. As reported by Union, Viktor Yahun, director of the Security Sector Reform Agency, said this on the air of the Kyiv 24 TV channel. The expert believes that for the Kremlin leader, this is a psychological trauma dating back to the Soviet Union. After all, these missiles can inflict quite serious strikes on Russia. Earlier, US President Donald Trump confirmed an upcoming meeting with Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He stated that the conversation would be about weapons, specifically about Tomahawk missiles. Trump did not answer the journalist's follow-up question about deliveries, but turned to the president of Argentina and jokingly offered him a few Tomahawks.
Everyone wants Tomahawks. We have a lot of Tomahawks. Maybe you need a few Tomahawks in Argentina.
Meanwhile, NATO is looking for ways to make it easier to shoot down Russian aircraft in its airspace. According to The Telegraph, defense ministers of the alliance countries are holding relevant discussions. It is noted that alliance leaders, including US President Donald Trump, support the idea of a tougher response. This could include shooting down Russian aircraft that violate NATO airspace. At the same time, a number of countries have expressed concern that such actions could lead to an escalation of the conflict.
Russia is proposing a local ceasefire to allow for repair work at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The IAEA is acting as a mediator between representatives of Russia and Ukraine on this issue. Restoration work on the external power supply to the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which has been operating on emergency diesel generators for 3 weeks, may begin by the end of this week. This was stated by Russia's permanent representative to international organizations in Vienna, Mikhail Ulyanov, according to the Moscow Times. According to the Russian representative, it is necessary to restore 2 damaged power lines, the Dniprovska and the Ferroloy lines. As is known, on September 23rd, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant lost its external power supply when the high-voltage Dniprovska transmission line was disconnected. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated that the cause of this was shelling by the Russian Federation. Putin is losing control of the situation and may agree to a ceasefire. He is likely trying to push through some formula for a temporary ceasefire on terms favorable to Russia in order to stabilize the situation and then resume aggression when circumstances allow. This is stated in a publication on the website of the Washington Center for European Policy Analysis. The author of the publication, whose name is not disclosed to protect them from political persecution, claims that among Russian opposition figures there is an expectation of a pause in the war in the near future. In their opinion, the Russian Federation's summer offensive at the front was the Kremlin's last decisive attempt to achieve strategic success. Its failure may force Putin to agree to a ceasefire in the near future. Notably, calls for a truce came from Russia on the eve of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy's visit to the White House, where he intends to ask the American president for Tomahawk missiles. President Zelenskyy also reported successes by the Ukrainian armed forces near Orikhiv in the Zaporizhzhia region. There has been an advance of more than 3 kilometers.
The head of the foreign ministry of the aggressor country Russia, Sergei Lavrov, stated that rumors about the poisoning of former Syrian dictator Bashar Assad allegedly do not correspond to reality. Earlier, the media reported that in September, Assad was urgently taken to the hospital after a possible poisoning attempt. The head of the Russian foreign ministry said that the former Syrian dictator has no problems in Moscow and that no poisoning took place. Lavrov added that the Kremlin granted asylum to Assad and his family purely for humanitarian reasons. Sergei Lavrov also commented on the absence of Moscow's representatives at the summit in Egypt, which was dedicated to concluding a peace agreement on the Gaza Strip. According to him, Russia was not invited. He said that the invitation was sent by the summit organizers. The leadership of Egypt, which coordinated its actions with other Arab initiators, but primarily with the United States. It should be noted that this is the first statement by the head of the foreign ministry of the aggressor country after a long absence from the public sphere. The Telegram channel Kremlin Tabakerka previously reported that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin was allegedly advised to arrest Lavrov for treason. According to the channel's sources, at the very least he faces dismissal. In particular, Lavrov is allegedly accused of committing treason and of hindering the establishment of Russian-American relations. The possible resignation of the foreign minister may be connected to the transfer of power in the Kremlin. According to the Telegram channel General SVR Dmitry Patrushev, who currently serves as Deputy Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, is allegedly the successor for the post of President of Russia. The channel reports that the final stage of the power transition is already near.
The new president of Syria, Ahmed Asharah, has arrived in Moscow for talks with Putin, where he intends to raise the issue of extraditing Bashar al-Assad. Footage has appeared online showing the empty streets of Moscow as the Syrian president's motorcade drives through. Reuters, citing a source, reports that the new president of Syria intends to demand that the Russian Federation hand over Bashar al-Assad for trial on charges of alleged crimes against humanity committed against Syrians. Additionally, according to the agency's interlocutor, the Syrian president plans to hold talks with Putin regarding the continued presence of the Russian naval base in Tartus and the Russian air base in Khmeimim. The Russian dictator, whose army bombed Aleppo, made a statement during a meeting with the Syrian leader.
Throughout all these decades, we have always been guided solely by the interests of the Syrian people.
Interestingly, the British tabloid The Sun recently reported an attempt to poison Bashar al-Assad in Russia. According to the publication, the former president was urgently taken to the hospital after a probable assassination attempt. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights stated that Assad was discharged from a hospital on the outskirts of Moscow on September 30th. They claim that the former Syrian dictator was poisoned in order to disgrace the Russian government and accuse it of being complicit in his death. Against the backdrop of this news, the foreign minister of the aggressor country Russia, Sergei Lavrov, stated that the rumors about the poisoning of former Syrian dictator Bashar Assad are not true. Lavrov said that the Kremlin granted asylum to Assad and his family purely for humanitarian reasons. Let us recall that on November 28, 2024, opposition forces in Syria launched a large-scale offensive, capturing city after city. As a result, Bashar Assad's regime collapsed, and the dictator himself hastily fled from Damascus to Russia on the night of December 8. The new president of Syria, Ahmed Ashara, was the leader of a rebel group that, together with other armed factions, captured Damascus in December 2024 and overthrew Bashar Assad's regime.
On October 17th, US President Donald Trump will meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. On the eve of the meeting, Trump stated that Ukraine is planning to launch an offensive.
We will talk to him about the war. And we will discuss the fact that, as I understand it, they want to go on the offensive. I will make a decision about this. But they would like to start an offensive. You know that. And we will have to make a decision.
Trump also once again called on the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, to stop killing Ukrainians and his own Russian people. According to him, Russia has lost 1.5 million people in the war, mostly soldiers. Earlier, Ukraine's ambassador to the US, Olga Stefanishina, said that the leaders would discuss Kyiv's request for the supply of Tomahawk missiles and other weapons, as well as strengthening Ukrainian air defense, energy resilience, and expanding cooperation in drone production. The Telegraph reports that the US president is working on creating a Ukraine Victory Fund, which will be financed by new tariffs on China. According to media reports, Trump instructed Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to discuss this plan with his European counterparts ahead of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to Washington. As Bessent stated,
Trump instructed the ambassador and me to inform our European allies that we support the idea of introducing this. Call it whatever you want. Tariffs on Russian oil for China or Ukraine victory tariffs on China. But our Ukrainian and European allies must be ready to join in. We will respond if our European partners stand with us.
The plan is designed to exert maximum economic pressure on Putin, whose war machine depends on support from China, in order to force him to come to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, Donald Trump stated that the Prime Minister of India assured him that his country would no longer buy Russian oil. The Senate supports the idea of granting US President Donald Trump the authority to impose 500% tariffs on China for purchasing Russian oil. This was stated by US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The secretary noted that despite Beijing's statements about wanting to maintain peace worldwide, China's purchase of Russian oil is fueling the Russian war machine.
China purchases 60% of Russian energy resources. They buy 90% of Iran's. Soon, we will publish photographs provided to us by the Ukrainian government, which show that a significant portion of Ukrainian drones are made up of Chinese components.
Earlier, US President Donald Trump stated that the United States may halt trade with China in certain areas. Soon after, Donald Trump stated that the United States is currently in a trade war with China.
We're already in it. Without our tariffs, we wouldn't have any defense.
This was how the American leader responded to a question about the possibility of a long-term trade war with China if no agreements are reached at the upcoming meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The meeting is scheduled to take place in a few weeks. The US president added that tariffs help maintain peace and will play a decisive role in ending military conflicts. Let us recall that Senator Lindsey Graham has drafted a bill that provides for the most extensive sanctions against Russia since the beginning of the war. The bill is aimed at forcing the Kremlin to end its aggression against Ukraine and to sit down at the table for real negotiations. Special attention in the bill is given to the energy sector. It is proposed to introduce 500% tariffs on all goods of Russian origin, as well as similar duties for countries that continue to buy oil, gas, uranium, and petroleum products from Russia. The US Department of Defense has developed plans to sell or transfer Tomahawk missiles in the event that Donald Trump gives the corresponding order, writes the New York Times. It is still unclear how many Tomahawk missiles the United States could provide, how Ukraine would safely store them, and what impact a limited number of missiles would have, writes the New York Times. The Financial Times reports that the US will manage the Tomahawk cruise missiles if they are transferred to Ukraine. The head of the president's office, Andriy Yermak, reported that a delegation of Ukrainian officials currently visiting the United States met with representatives of Raytheon, which manufactures Tomahawk cruise missiles. The Ukrainian delegation also met with representatives of another American company, Lockheed Martin.
Their technologies save lives. F-16s and modern air defense systems protect the Ukrainian sky, and their offensive solutions reliably support our forces at the front.
Yermak added that Ukraine's cooperation with American companies continues to grow. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that the transfer of American Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine would cause colossal damage to Russian-American relations. Dictator Vladimir Putin has already declared that the supply of American long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine would lead to an entirely new level of escalation, including in relations between Moscow and Washington. Propaganda telegram channels are already claiming that Trump will allegedly send the first batch of Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine as early as next week. Earlier, Trump stated that, in a certain sense, he has made a decision regarding whether to supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, but he wants to know what they will be used for and where they will be sent.
The Kremlin is losing control over the Far East. This was reported by the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine. The agency notes that the aggressor country is increasingly paying its war allies with its own territories, thus lacking the resources to develop the country's largest region, the Far Eastern Federal District. The Kremlin is opening the door to external expansion. At the same time, China is increasing its economic influence. According to forecasts, investment in the Far Eastern region could reach 1 trillion rubles by 2025. Intelligence reports also state that China is conducting a creeping demographic expansion. According to the agency, up to 2 million Chinese people already live in the territory from Vladivostok to the Urals, and this number is increasing. Meanwhile, according to foreign intelligence, North Korea is carrying out a labor expansion. Over the past year, more than 15,000 North Korean workers have arrived in the Far East, and unofficially, the number may be as high as 50,000. The agency concludes that all of this could create a conflict of interest between the partners. Thus, the Kremlin risks losing influence over nearly 7 million square kilometers of its own territory, with a population of almost 8 million people. As financial and economic expert Andrei Novak noted on the Freedom Channel, China is pursuing a very shrewd policy by making Russia dependent on its resources. Moreover, China has other motives as well.
Sooner or later, it is highly probable that China will carefully choose the opportune moment when Russia is at its absolute weakest point in order to reclaim, with truly minimal bloodshed and very little resistance, all those historical territories that without any doubt genuinely and rightfully belong to China.
The expert reminds us that Russia spent centuries conquering lands in the Far East, and China will do everything possible to get them back. On Friday, October 17th, a decision may be made to establish a ceasefire for repairs at the temporarily occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. According to Sky News, this was stated by Alexei Likachov, the head of the Russian State Nuclear Energy Corporation, Rosatom. According to the official, establishing a period of silence on the battlefield will make it possible to carry out work on 2 damaged power lines leading to the plant, one of which is located in territory occupied by Russia. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi also confirmed that repairs to the power lines should begin in the near future. He noted that repairs are needed on both sides of the front line. Grossi stated that he is continuing consultations with Russia and Ukraine so that this work can continue over the next few days. According to him, both sides are ready for a temporary ceasefire. It should be noted that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is currently being powered by 7 emergency diesel generators. As stated by Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha, Russia deliberately severed the nuclear power plant's connections to the Ukrainian power grid in order to forcibly test the plant's connection to its own network. According to him, nothing like this has ever happened in the history of nuclear energy. On September 30th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy announced that an emergency situation had occurred at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Due to Russian shelling, the plant has been cut off from power and the electrical grid. Zelenskyy emphasized that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is being supplied with electricity by diesel generators, and this is an emergency situation, since neither the generators nor the plant have ever operated in this mode for such a long time. Earlier, the Director General of the IAEA warned that if all backup life support systems were completely shut down, there could be a risk of nuclear fuel meltdown. Hundreds of people were evacuated from the Crocus Expo exhibition center on the border of Moscow and the region. According to media reports, many people ended up outside without outerwear. The footage shows visitors leaving the building. However, as reported by the Telegram channel Moscow Life, the alarm turned out to be false. The evacuation occurred due to a technical malfunction in the system at Crocus Spa. Let us recall that in March 2024, one of the largest terrorist attacks in Russian history took place in the neighboring Crocus City Hall concert venue next to Crocus Expo. At that time, the terrorists opened fire on people before the start of the band Picnic's performance. In addition, the Crocus City Hall building was set on fire, as a result of which it burned down. Responsibility for the attack was claimed by the Afghan branch of the international terrorist organization Islamic State, which called it the most brutal attack in recent years. As a result of the terrorist attack, 150 people were killed. According to media reports, the US government warned the Kremlin about the planned attack. However, the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin rejected the warnings and called them provocative statements aimed at intimidating and destabilizing society.
Veterans of the so-called special military operation criticized the authorities of the Russian Federation at a gathering in Siberia. They expressed their dissatisfaction, saying that the authorities did not stand up for General Vladimir Shamanov, who was insulted by the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov.
How can young people even look at our government after this? How are they supposed to judge our government? How are they supposed to follow it, when first they themselves hand out awards, and then the head of one of the republics can just put him down, say that he's an enemy, a murderer, and a maniac?
The Russian Federation's military added that they took the insult against Shamanov personally.
Here we are promoting patriotism, love for the motherland, respect for veterans, especially for heroes of the Russian Federation. But in reality, people see the reaction too. It's absolutely zero. We talked about it, insulted the heroes of Russia, and forgot about it.
Another target of criticism was propagandist Vladimir Solovyov, who was criticized for his verbal attack on Zid bloggers Pozniakov and Alex Parker.
Why is it that this person, for example, I stopped watching his program several years ago, why does he still continue to broadcast on the country's main channel?
Let us recall that earlier in a published video, Solovyov revealed the location of the secret Rubicon drone unit base in the Russian army. Analyst Alexei Rykov notes that such statements are a frightening signal for the Russian authorities.
Because this is when the infighting begins, like in a jar, when they're ready to tear each other apart. Some because they see that there's still injustice all around, and others because they're afraid they'll be hanged, and these ones know how to fight, while those need to hold on to power.
As Reuters reported in September, citing sources close to the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin views the return of participants in the war in Ukraine as a potential risk that he wants to carefully manage in order to avoid destabilizing society and the political system he has created.
US President Donald Trump held a phone conversation with Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and announced a new meeting. According to him, they discussed the prospects for ending the war in Ukraine. The American leader said that the conversation with Putin was very productive and marked a major step forward. As a result of the conversation, the leaders of the two countries agreed that their representatives would meet next week. The United States will be represented at the meeting by Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio will meet with his Russian counterpart, who, as you know, is Lavrov, and this will happen quite soon.
Trump added that after this, he will meet with Putin in Budapest to try to put an end to the war. According to him, the meeting could take place within 2 weeks. Donald Trump reminded that on October 17th, he plans to meet with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in the Oval Office. There, among other things, they will discuss the conversation with Putin. The US President also said that during the conversation with Putin, the topic of providing Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles was discussed. Answering a journalist's question, he noted that Putin tried to dissuade him from making the deliveries. At the same time, Trump did not say whether Ukraine would receive the missiles.
I said, Putin, you don't mind if I hand over a few thousand Tomahawk missiles to your opponents, do you? He didn't really like that idea. He didn't like it.
Trump also believes that a meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin could take place. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt announced this at a briefing. As is known, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has already arrived in Washington at the invitation of the US President. According to the schedule of the American president, the talks will take place over lunch in an informal setting and will be closed to the press.
Germany has demanded that Hungary arrest dictator Vladimir Putin if he comes to a meeting with the US president. Berlin reminded Budapest of its obligations to the International Criminal Court. Hungary had previously announced its withdrawal from the jurisdiction of the ICC, but this decision will only formally take effect in 2026, so the warrant is still valid. However, Budapest refused to arrest the Kremlin ruler Putin, as stated by Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó.
We are respectfully awaiting President Vladimir Putin, of course. We will ensure he has the opportunity to enter Hungary, hold successful negotiations here, and then return home. No coordination with anyone is necessary.
The Hungarian foreign minister has also already announced the start of preparations for a meeting between Trump and Putin. And Hungary's pro-Russian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán was quick to call Putin. Trump met with Putin in Alaska in August of this year. At that time, the US president came to the meeting intending to reach an agreement with the Russian dictator to end the war in Ukraine. But as reported by the Financial Times, instead Putin rejected his proposal and angered him with a history lecture. Sources told the publication that Trump was very surprised by Putin's lecture, raised his voice several times, and even threatened to walk out. In the end, he cut the meeting short and cancelled the planned lunch. At that lunch, the delegations were supposed to discuss economic ties and cooperation. The Financial Times noted that as a result, there were changes in Donald Trump's position in favor of Ukraine. Let us recall that on October 16th, after a conversation with Putin, Trump announced a meeting with the Russian dictator. It is expected that the summit will take place in the capital of Hungary within the next 2 weeks.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is ready to meet with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. This was stated in an interview with Axios by the head of the president's office, Andriy Yermak. According to him, in a phone conversation with the American leader Donald Trump on the eve of his trip to Washington, Zelenskyy reiterated his readiness to meet in any format and anywhere in the world except Russia or Belarus. Putin has repeatedly rejected such a meeting. The head of the president's office noted that both phone conversations between Zelenskyy and Trump were very good. According to Yermak, the presidents understand each other, and the fact that they agreed on a meeting so quickly is evidence of friendship and partnership. Meanwhile, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has already given instructions to prepare a summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, which will take place in Budapest. He said that on the evening of October 16th he spoke with Trump by phone, and on October 17th he intends to speak with Putin. Orbán believes that, apart from Budapest, there is no other place in Europe suitable for such a summit. According to the Hungarian Prime Minister, the meeting between Putin and Trump could take place a week after the meeting of the Russian and US foreign ministers, which is scheduled for next week. According to The Telegraph, the upcoming meeting between the American and Russian leaders in Budapest has sparked a wave of outrage in Europe. The article states that for Brussels, this is a humiliation, while for Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, it is a political triumph. According to The Telegraph, European diplomats are already calling the summit a blow to the European Union. After all, the negotiations between the US and Russia will take place in a country that has repeatedly blocked support for Ukraine and maintains close ties with the Kremlin. On the night of October 17th, a series of powerful explosions occurred in occupied Crimea. According to the Telegram channel Crimean Wind, drones attacked an oil depot in the village of Vardiesky, resulting in a large-scale fire breaking out there. There are also preliminary reports of a hit on an ammunition depot. According to the channel, the attacked oil depot belongs to a network of gas stations, which could lead to an even greater shortage of gasoline and diesel fuel in occupied Crimea. Crimean Wind reports that many ambulances arrived from Simferopol to the village of Hvardieska. Explosions also occurred in Saki and Novofedorivka, and in Yevpatoria, classes in schools were cancelled. The occupation authorities reported damage to several electrical substations in the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea. At the same time, they remained silent about the massive fire at the oil depot. According to subscribers of the Telegram channel in Hvadiske, there were strikes not only on the oil depot but also in the northern area, as well as on the Russian garrison stationed near the airfield. In addition, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy, Dmytro Pletenchuk, said on the Apostrophe channel that during the overnight Ukrainian drone attack on Crimea, Russian forces shot down their own aircraft. He did not provide any further details, adding that all information is currently being gathered in Crimea. It should be noted that the defense forces are carrying out a series of successful strikes on military targets in temporarily occupied Crimea. One of the main targets remains the Crimean Bridge. Ukraine is awaiting a decision from US President Donald Trump regarding the provision of Tomahawk missiles, which could inflict significant damage on Russian military facilities on the occupied peninsula. Furthermore, in September, Donald Trump stated that Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, has every opportunity to fight and restore all of its territory to its original state. This indicates that Ukraine has the potential to liberate temporarily occupied Crimea quite soon.
The Ukrainian Navy confirmed the crash of a Russian Su-30 in temporarily occupied Crimea on October 17th. It is reported that a Russian radio intercept mentions both engines catching fire.
It is likely that, while repelling a UAV attack using air defense systems, the enemy shot down their own multi-role fighter jet.
Earlier, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy in the ISU, Dmytro Pletenchuk, stated that Russian forces shot down their own aircraft while repelling drones over the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea.
They were defending against Ukrainian attacks so vigorously that they ended up shooting down their own plane over Crimea. The struggle continues.
When a journalist asked for more details about the plane, Pletenchuk made a joke in response.
The details are currently being collected on the territory of Crimea.
Overall, since the start of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, there have been numerous recorded cases where Russian air defense has shot down its own aircraft. In the first weeks of the aggression, Russia lost up to 6 aircraft to its own air defense missile systems. In 2023 to 2024, there were recorded cases where Russian air defense shot down its own missiles and drones. As previously reported on the night of October 17th, a series of powerful explosions occurred in temporarily occupied Crimea. Monitoring public channels reported that there were hits on Russian occupiers' facilities. According to the Crimean Wind Channel, UAVs attacked the village of Gvardeskoye at night. As a result of the strikes, an oil depot is on fire. A thick column of smoke can be seen even in Simferopol. It is reported that 2 fuel tanks are already burning. Meanwhile, it became known that the defense forces of southern Ukraine struck a Russian Smerch in the occupied part of Kherson region.